Rat pigs go squeak oink. Squeak oink, YouTubers. And welcome back to Rat Pig's Garage. Today we're going to be installing my front sway bar, or anti-sway bar, to be more correct, on my Firebird with some new polyurethane bushings from Energy Suspension. While I had the sway bar off, I went ahead and scuffed it up with some heavy-duty Scotch-Brite pads and applied a coat of Rust-Oleum Satin Black. So how do you install sway bar bushings? Well, let's go over it. We'll start with the end links first, because they're the most complicated part of this. They consist of a bolt, a nut, 4 cupped washers, 4 bushings, and a spacer. It's critical that you get this part assembled correctly, so let's go over it. Let's just pause it here for a second. For this demonstration, I'm going to be showing the sway bar attached to the bottom of this end link, and then the top would be attached to the frame. This is how it would work on the rear. In reality, when we go to actually install this on the front of the car, the sway bar attaches to the top of the end link and the lower control arm attaches to the bottom. I just wanted to make that straight before we continued on so people don't get confused later on in the video. So let's get started. First we're going to put on the washer cup side up, then a bushing nipple up, pass that through our control arm. Then we're going to put on a bushing nipple down. There's nipples on those bushings. They're not symmetric if you look at them. Washer cup side down, spacer, washer cup side up, bushing nipple up, frame or control arm, bushing nipple down, washer cup side down, and finally our nut. And then the top of that would attach to either the frame of the car or the sway or the control arm. While comparing the old parts to the new parts, I noted that the Energy Suspension spacers are about a 1/4 inch longer than the OEM ones. Since I haven't done anything else to the suspension on this car, I haven't done anything to change the geometry on that suspension, and that 1/4 inch difference was definitely going to change the geometry on the sway bar, so I decided to go ahead and cut a 1/4 inch off the spacer on the Energy Suspension part. The bolts, I measured the bolts and they were basically the same length, so I'm not sure why the spacers are longer. Since I haven't had a reason to buy a real cutoff tool, I'm going to use my Dremel to go ahead and trim off this 1/4 inch. Played around with a couple ways of trying to mark this spacer so I could get a good line around it to cut the end off, and failed at a couple attempts. I went ahead and cut those out of the video, and what I ended up coming up with was using some Teflon tape and measuring it as close as I could around there to give me a line to cut on. I then used after I got the tape on there, I went with a ruler and measured all the way around it. I could use my thumbnail to kind of push the Teflon tape back a little bit if it wasn't quite 1/4 inch. This technique with the Teflon tape actually worked pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the rest of the video of me cutting the 1/4 inch off of this spacer. Okay, now that we've got the spacer issue figured out, let's go ahead and mount the sway bar to the front of the car. To do this, we're going to need these 2 bushings you see here in front of you. They're going to attach the sway bar to the frame rails. On top of each one of these, the metal retainer is a Zerk fitting that allow us to put grease actually into the inside of that bushing so that it doesn't squeak. Initially, when we do the install, though, we're going to go ahead and use some anti-seize and lube them up. It'll help us get the bushings over the top of the sway bar and hopefully keep it from squeaking until we get some grease into it. Here are the 4 bolts for each one of those retainers. I went ahead and ran those over a wire wheel, cleaned them up a little bit. I'll put some motor oil in each one of these when I do the install so that we can torque them down properly. Speaking of torque specs, we're going to need to figure out what the torque is for these bolts. I've got just the manual to do that. Hang on with me, I'll be back in a second. Yes, YouTubers, that's what you think it is. A genuine service manual for my '89 Firebird. Back in the day, when you got the owner's manual, if you flipped to the back, there was a page you could tear out. It was an order form. You filled it out, you mailed it snail mail to General Motors with a very large check. This was 90 bucks, I think, maybe 110 back in 1989, and they would ship you a service manual. I don't know if you can still do that nowadays. It's kind of a cool thing, especially if you got a car that you really like and you really want to keep. It has a very comprehensive breakdown of just about every system in the vehicle. Everything from electrical diagrams to how to rebuild the power steering pump. Today we're going to use it to find out what the torque spec is for the bushing bracket bolts. Alright, let's see what we got here. Looks like we're going to torque the end link bushings to 16 foot-pounds and the brackets to 39 foot-pounds. Alright, let's get you guys set up so you can watch the install. Okay, according to the manual, the slits in the front of these bushings need to go towards the front of the vehicle. So let's go ahead and get these things lubed up and get them on the sway bar and get it into place. Now that I have the frame rail, bushings, and brackets installed on the sway bar, I kind of slide it up into the undercarriage here and balance it on the rubber bump stops that are on the control arms. I tried to use a jack stand on the passenger side to support it while I worked on the driver's side. And basically I just put these bolts in finger tight, getting them started so I didn't get anything cross-threaded. The passenger side, I couldn't quite get one of the holes lined up. So I'm kind of checking back and forth to see what am I missing. And I kind of figure out that maybe the sway bar isn't quite centered, so I slide it over a little bit to the right. And that seemed to help me get those holes lined up so I could get the screws started on the passenger side. I then use a socket and an extension. At this point I don't want to tighten them up too much. I want the sway bar to be able to move up and down and left and right a little bit to help me get the end links on. So I just kind of run the bolts up until the snug, and then I kind of grab the sway bar, move back and forth and up and down just to make sure I have that movement before I switch over to working on the end links. Alright, let's go ahead and install the end links. This is on the driver's side, and we're looking down onto the control arm. Here's our sway bar sitting on that rubber bump stop for now, and there's a hole where the end link bolt will come through. I went ahead and cleaned it up a little bit with a wire brush, get rid of some of the rust, and I cleaned out all the crap that gets stuck in the bottom of that control arm. And you can see all this debris down here. This is what's left of the bushings as I retrieve one here stuck in the axle stand. You'll see that just it got really hard and brittle and just kind of fell apart. Just trash at this point. Okay, so let's go through this. We have our bolt, our washer, cup side up, our bushing, nipple side up. We pass that through the bottom of the control arm. We'll then have a bushing, nipple down, washer, cup side down, spacer, washer, cup side up, bushing, nipple side up. We'll pass that through our sway bar. Then we'll have a bushing nipple down. Followed by a washer cup side down. Followed by the nut. Now in 1989, all of these cars were metric. Everything on this car is metric. These aftermarket parts are standard. So basically we have a 9/16 bolt and a 9/16 nut. And I'm just going to run this down. I'm not going to run it down all the way tight because I want a little bit of leeway so I can get the end link bushings on the other side. About halfway through here I realized that I should have used the 1/2" ratchet on the top with the longer socket so that I could get the nut on deeper. Okay, now for the passenger side. Bolt, washer, cup side up, bushing, nipple up, through our control arm, bushing, nipple down, washer, cup side down, our spacer, washer, cup side up, bushing, nipple up, put it through our sway bar, bushing, nipple down, washer, cup side down, and finally our nut. According to the service manual, these should be tightened down to 16 foot-pounds after the nut is run down all the way through the threads. So I just ran them down and made it snug. These are Loctite bolts, so there's no fear of them backing off. Alright, let's go ahead and torque down our bracket bolts to 39 foot-pounds. And finally, back over to the driver's side. We'll go ahead and run down and snug up the end link nut on this side. Alright guys, that's a wrap. Apologize for not getting some video of the entire thing installed, but it was late, I was tired and sweaty, and you know, I'm still new to this YouTube thing. Anyway, I appreciate you getting this far, and thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Cats love rat pigs.